The emergency beacon crackled through space, its desperate signal reaching the outer edges of the Sol system. Captain HFY of the Corellian Republic pressed all four of his trembling hands against the communication console, his blue-scaled face wet with sweat that steamed in the cold air of his damaged ship. "This is Captain HFY of the scientific vessel times Bright Discovery *", he transmitted, his voice shaking with fear and exhaustion. "We are under attack by the HFY War fleet. Our escort ships are destroyed. We carry vital research data that could save billions of lives across the galaxy. We need immediate military assistance from any species capable of defending against a hegemony armada." The captain had heard whispers about this system from other space traders. They called it Sol, home to a young species that had just developed faster-than-light travel a few decades ago. The stories painted them as primitive but surprisingly resourceful. Some traders even claimed these humans had fought off hegemony scouts before, though most dismissed such tales as fiction. HFY didn't care about the stories now. His ship's engines were failing. His shields were down to 12%. And the massive hegemony dreadnoughts were closing in fast. The research data in his ship's computer contained the cure for the Red Death plague that was sweeping through peaceful worlds. If the hegemony captured or destroyed this information, millions would die. "Please," he whispered into the transmitter, "anyone who can hear this message. We have medical research that can save countless lives. The hegemony cannot be allowed to possess or destroy it." For several long minutes, only static answered his call. HFY watched his rear sensors as the dark shapes of hegemony warships grew larger. Their hulls bristled with weapons designed to crack planets and burn entire star systems. The lead dreadnought alone carried enough firepower to glass a moon. Then a voice crackled through the comm system. It spoke in clear, confident, galactic standard, with only a slight accent. "Scientific vessel times Bright Discovery *". This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force. We have received your distress call and are dispatching immediate assistance. Please transmit your exact coordinates and the nature of your cargo." HFY's heart skipped several beats. He had expected maybe a few patrol ships, perhaps a desperate last stand by whatever small force this young species could muster. The calm professionalism in the human admiral's voice suggested something else entirely. "Admiral Chen, thank you for responding." HFY replied quickly, his fingers dancing over his controls to send the requested information. "I carry the complete research data for a cure to the Red Death plague. The hegemony has already destroyed 3 research stations to prevent this cure from reaching the galaxy. They want to use the plague as a weapon." "Understood, Captain. We are familiar with the hegemony's methods. Please maintain your current course and prepare for combat support. Our ships will be with you shortly." The communication ended, leaving HFY staring at his display in confusion. The confidence in the human admiral's voice had been absolute, as if dispatching aid against a hegemony armada was routine. But how could such a young species possibly stand against the galaxy's most feared military force? His tactical officer, Lieutenant Veltar, looked up from her station with wide, frightened eyes. "Captain, the hegemony fleet is breaking formation. They're moving to attack positions. 47 ships, including 8 dreadnoughts. We have perhaps 10 minutes before they're in firing range." HFY nodded grimly. "Keep monitoring for these human ships, and prepare to transfer all research data to any vessel that can receive it. If we don't survive this, at least the cure might." The minutes crawled by like hours. HFY watched the hegemony fleet approach with the inexorable certainty of death itself. Their ships were massive, their weapons charged, their intent clear. The lead dreadnought, Eternal Conquest *, was the size of a small city and had never lost a battle. "Captain," Veltar suddenly shouted, her voice filled with disbelief, "I'm detecting massive gravitational distortions throughout the system. Something big is happening." HFY looked at his sensors and felt his blood turn cold. Space itself seemed to be tearing open in dozens of locations around the Sol system. Massive tiers in reality appeared one after another, each one crackling with energy that made his ship's instruments scream warnings. "What in the name of the eternal light?" he whispered. Then the first human ship emerged from the nearest tier in space-time, and Zex-Hi understood why the Admiral had sounded so confident. The vessel was enormous, easily 3 times the size of a hegemony dreadnought. Its hull was a dark gray that seemed to absorb light, covered in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. Weapons ports ran along its flanks in neat rows, each one larger than the main cannon on Zex-Hi's escort ships. But what truly terrified him was the sense of controlled power that radiated from the ship like heat from a star. "By the light," Veltar breathed. "That's just the first one." More tiers opened, and more ships emerged. Human vessels of every size and configuration poured into the system like an avalanche. Sleek destroyers that moved like hunting cats, massive carrier ships that immediately began launching clouds of smaller attack craft, cruisers bristling with so many weapons that Zex-Hi couldn't count them all, but it was the battleships that made his hands tremble. Ship after ship emerged from the dimensional portals, each one a monument to human engineering and military might. They moved with the fluid grace of apex predators, taking positions with precision that spoke of countless hours of training and coordination. "How many?" Zex-Hi whispered. Veltar's voice was barely audible. "I count over 200 ships so far, Captain, and more are still coming through." The hegemony fleet had stopped advancing. Even they recognized what they were facing. Zex-Hi could imagine the panic on their bridges as their sensors registered the massive human armada that had materialized around them. The hunters had suddenly become the hunted. Admiral Chen's voice came through the comm system again, still calm and professional, but now with an edge of steel that made Zex-Hi shiver. "Captain Zex-Hi, this is Admiral Chen. Please move your ship to the coordinates we're transmitting. You'll be safe there while we deal with your uninvited guests." "Admiral," Zex-Hi managed to say, "there are 47 hegemony ships out there. 8 dreadnoughts. This is a full battle fleet, not a raiding party." "Understood, Captain. We brought enough ships." Zex-Hi looked at his display as more human vessels continued to pour through the dimensional portals. The number had passed 300 and showed no signs of stopping. Each ship was a masterpiece of military engineering, armed and armored for the kind of warfare that turned solar systems into graveyards. "Admiral," he said, his voice filled with awe and growing hope, "how did you mobilize such a force so quickly?" The human admiral's response sent chills down Zex-Hi's spine. "Captain, when you sent out that distress call asking for military assistance, you didn't specify how much assistance you needed, so we brought the entire Third Fleet. After all, you said the research data could save billions of lives. That seemed worth protecting properly." As Zex-Hi guided his damaged ship toward the coordinates the humans had provided, he realized that the galaxy's understanding of this young species had been catastrophically wrong. The humans hadn't just developed space travel and weapons, they had built a war machine that could challenge the greatest military powers in the galaxy. Behind him, the hegemony fleet was discovering this truth in the worst possible way. Admiral Keth Moore of the hegemony First Assault Fleet stood on the bridge of the Time's Eternal Conquest asterisk, his massive frame rigid with shock as he watched the impossible scene unfold before him. In 30 years of conquest across 17 star systems, he had never seen anything like the force that had just materialized around his fleet. "Status report," he growled, his voice carrying the authority that had crushed a dozen rebellions. Commander Yixtal, his chief tactical officer, worked frantically at her console. Her normally steady hands shook as she processed the sensor data. "Admiral, I count 412 human vessels, and the number is still climbing. Their fleet composition includes at least 60 battleships, each one massing significantly more than our dreadnoughts. They're maintaining perfect formation, while moving at speeds that should be impossible for ships of that size." Keth Moore felt a chill run down his armored spine. 400 ships was more than the entire hegemony had committed to the conquest of the Zellan Empire. These humans had deployed what appeared to be a full war fleet to protect a single research vessel. "What do we know about human military capabilities?" he demanded. "Very little, Admiral," Yixtal admitted. "Our intelligence reports suggested they were a young species with limited technology. A few patrol ships at most. This," she gestured at the display, showing the massive human armada, This changes everything. Admiral Chen's voice suddenly filled the hegemony bridge, transmitted on all frequencies with crystal clarity. Hegemony vessels. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force. You are in violation of interstellar law by attacking a civilian research vessel in neutral space. You have 30 seconds to power down your weapons and surrender, or we will consider you hostile combatants and respond accordingly. Kethmore's jaw clenched. In his entire career, no one had dared speak to him with such casual authority. The hegemony fleet was the terror of the galaxy. Their very presence enough to make entire civilizations surrender without a fight. Open a channel, he ordered. This is Admiral Kethmore of the Hegemony First Assault Fleet. You are interfering with hegemony military operations. Stand down immediately, or face annihilation. The response came back instantly, and Kethmore was surprised to hear what sounded almost like amusement in the human admiral's voice. Admiral Kethmore, according to our records, you're wanted for war crimes by 17 different species. Your fleet has been responsible for the deaths of over 4 billion civilians in the past 5 years alone. Your threat of annihilation is noted and dismissed. You now have 15 seconds to surrender. Kethmore's blood boiled. No one spoke to the hegemony with such disrespect. All ships. Battle formation. Prepare to show these primitives the cost of challenging the hegemony. Admiral, Yixtal said urgently, the human ships are moving. They're not taking defensive positions. Kethmore looked at his tactical display and felt his confidence waver. The human fleet was indeed moving. But not in any formation he recognized. Instead of forming a battle line or taking cover behind their larger ships, they were spreading out in a complex three-dimensional pattern that seemed to surround his entire fleet from every possible angle. What are they doing? He muttered. Time's up. Admiral Chen's voice announced with the finality of a judge pronouncing sentence. All hegemony vessels are now classified as hostile combatants. Terran Defense Force ships, you are cleared to engage. Rules of engagement are weapons-free. Show them what happens when you threaten medical research intended to save lives. The first human ship to fire was one of their smaller destroyers, a sleek vessel less than half the size of a hegemony cruiser. Kethmore watched it happen with the slow-motion clarity that comes with extreme shock. A beam of pure energy erupted from the destroyer's main cannon, crossing the distance between fleets in the blink of an eye. It struck the hegemony cruiser, times Iron Fang, times directly amidships, and the massive warship simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not crippled, but entirely vaporized in a flash of light that left only expanding gas where a ship carrying 3,000 warriors had been moments before. Impossible, Kethmore whispered. Then the rest of the human fleet opened fire, and Kethmore realized that impossible was just the beginning. The space around the hegemony fleet erupted into a storm of energy beams, missile swarms, and weapons that defied easy classification. Human ships fired with mechanical precision, their targeting systems so advanced that every shot found its mark regardless of evasive maneuvers or defensive screens. The hegemony dreadnought times, worldbreaker times, took a direct hit from what appeared to be a single torpedo launched by a human cruiser. The torpedo penetrated the dreadnought's shields as if they didn't exist, punched through 3 meters of armor plating, and detonated somewhere inside the ship's core. The explosion that followed was visible from 3 star systems away. Return fire, Kethmore roared. All weapons, full spread. Concentrate on their largest ships. The hegemony fleet responded with the fury that had conquered planets. Hundreds of massive energy cannons fired simultaneously, creating a light show that would have been beautiful if it weren't so deadly. Enough firepower to crack moons streaked toward the human battleships. The human ships didn't even try to dodge. Instead, shimmering barriers of energy appeared around each vessel, deflecting the hegemony weapons with casual ease. The few beams that penetrated the barriers struck armor plating that absorbed the impacts without even scorching. Their shields are holding, Yixtal reported in disbelief. Admiral, our weapons aren't even scratching their armor. Kethmore watched in growing horror as his fleet, the pride of the hegemony military, was systematically dismantled by an enemy that fought with the calm efficiency of farmers harvesting grain. Human ships moved through the battle like dancers, never wasting a shot, never missing a target. never showing the slightest sign of concern despite being outnumbered. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "I'm receiving surrender requests from 17 of our ships. The Times Bloodhammer Times and Times Stellar Doom Times are requesting immediate evacuation assistance. Their crews are abandoning ship. Cowards!" Kethmore snarled. But even as he said it, he watched another hegemony dreadnought split in half under fire from what looked like a human science vessel. Admiral Chen's voice came through the comm system again, still professional, but with an underlying current of controlled anger. "Admiral Kethmore, you have lost 23 ships in the past 4 minutes. Your fleet is surrounded and outgunned. This is your final opportunity to surrender before we demonstrate why the human species is not to be trifled with." Kethmore looked at his tactical display and felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: genuine fear. His 47-ship assault fleet, capable of conquering entire star systems, had been reduced to 18 functional vessels in less than 5 minutes. The humans had accomplished this while suffering exactly 0 casualties. "What do you want?" he transmitted, the words tasting like acid in his mouth. "I want you to understand something very clearly." "Admiral," Chen replied, "the research data on that ship could save billions of lives across the galaxy. Every moment you delayed its delivery, people died from the plague it could cure. You attacked a medical research vessel carrying the means to end suffering on a galactic scale." Around Kethmore's flagship, the human fleet shifted formation again. Instead of continuing their attack, they formed a perfect sphere around the surviving hegemony ships. Every human weapon remained trained on his fleet, but they held their fire. "Here's what's going to happen," Admiral Chen continued. "You and your surviving crew members are going to be escorted to the nearest neutral port, where you'll be turned over to the Galactic Council for trial. Your ships will be impounded as evidence of your war crimes, and you're going to send a message to your superiors explaining that the Sol system and all human space is now under the protection of the Terran Defense Force." "And if we refuse?" Kethmore asked, though he already knew the answer. "Then we'll demonstrate what the 4th and 5th fleets can do." The 3rd fleet was just what we had available on short notice. Kethmore stared at his display in absolute silence. The 3rd fleet. This overwhelming force that had crushed his assault fleet was just one of several human fleets. The implications were staggering. "How?" he whispered. "How did you build such a force? Your species only achieved spaceflight decades ago." Admiral Chen's response carried a note of grim satisfaction. "Admiral, when a species learns that the galaxy is full of civilizations like yours, civilizations that use plague as a weapon and target medical research, they have 2 choices. They can become victims, or they can build the tools necessary to protect innocent life." Humanity chose option 2. As hegemony ships began transmitting surrender codes and powering down their weapons, Kethmore realized that the galaxy's balance of power had just shifted in a way that no one had anticipated. The humans weren't just another young species fumbling toward galactic civilization. They were apex predators who had been quietly preparing for war, while the rest of the galaxy dismissed them as primitives. 3 days later, Captain Zex High stood in the medical bay of the human battleship Times Indomitable Will *, watching in amazement as teams of human scientists worked alongside his own researchers. The cure for the Red Death Plague was being refined and prepared for mass production with an efficiency that left him speechless. Dr. Maria Santos, the human lead researcher, looked up from her microscope with a smile that seemed to light up the entire laboratory. "Captain, we've successfully synthesized your cure and improved the delivery method. We can now produce it in quantities sufficient to treat the entire affected population within 6 months." Zex High felt tears of relief streaming down his scaled face. "Doctor, my people have been working on this cure for 3 years. How did you achieve such improvements in just 3 days?" "Teamwork, Doctor," Santos replied simply. "Your research was brilliant, but you were working with limited resources while under constant threat. When you combine good science with unlimited resources and safety to work, amazing things happen quickly." Admiral Chen entered the medical bay, her presence immediately commanding attention from both human and alien personnel. She moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had just rewritten galactic military doctrine in a single battle. "Captain HFY," she said, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting that he had learned to appreciate. "I wanted to update you on the situation. The Galactic Council has formally recognized human territorial claims and has requested that we establish a permanent peacekeeping presence in this sector." HFY shook her hand carefully, still amazed by the casual strength he could feel in her grip. "Admiral, I must ask. The fleet you deployed to save us, it was incredible. But you spoke of other fleets. How many ships does humanity actually possess?" Admiral Chen's expression became thoughtful, as if she were considering how much to reveal. "Captain, the Terran Defense Force currently operates 12 active fleets. The third fleet that responded to your distress call represents approximately 8% of our total military capability." The translated words hit HFY like a physical blow. 8%. The force that had destroyed a hegemony assault fleet without breaking formation was less than 1/10 of humanity's military strength. "But how?" he whispered. "Your species has only been in space for a few decades. How did you build such a massive military force?" Admiral Chen walked to the large viewport that showed the human fleet maintaining protective formation around the research vessels. "Captain, when humanity first achieved faster-than-light travel, we sent out exploration ships to learn about our galactic neighbors. Do you know what those ships found?" HFY shook his head, though he was beginning to suspect the answer would be disturbing. "They found the remains of 17 different civilizations that had been completely destroyed by the hegemony," Admiral Chen continued. "Entire species wiped out because they couldn't defend themselves. Billions of innocent beings killed for the crime of existing in territory the hegemony wanted. Ard. The way this fast and the farting fiver." She turned to face HFY directly, and he could see the steel behind her calm exterior. "They found records of the Red Death Plague being deliberately spread to weaken civilizations before conquest. They found evidence of medical research being destroyed to prevent cures from reaching those who needed them. So we made a decision," she said quietly. "Humanity would never be helpless in the face of such evil. We would build a military force capable of protecting not just ourselves, but any innocent species that called for help. Every human world contributed resources. Every human colony contributed personnel. We turned our entire industrial capacity toward one goal: making sure that genocidal empires could never again operate without consequence." "Doctor," Santos spoke up from her workstation. "Captain, you should know that Admiral Chen volunteered for this mission personally. She has family members who died from the Red Death on one of the outer colonies. When your distress call mentioned the cure, nothing in the galaxy could have kept the Admiral from responding." HFY looked between the two humans, beginning to understand the depth of their commitment. "You built an armada to protect strangers?" We built an armada to protect civilization itself," Admiral Chen corrected. "The hegemony, the destroyer cults, the harvest fleets, all the powers that prey on the innocent. They've operated for centuries because no single species had the strength to stand against them. That ends now." A communication alarm chimed, and Admiral Chen activated a holographic display that showed the bridge of her flagship. A young human officer appeared, his expression serious but controlled. "Admiral, we're receiving multiple distress calls from the vegan system. Hegemony reinforcements are attacking civilian evacuation ships. They're demanding the return of their captured fleet." Admiral Chen's expression hardened into something that made HFY step back involuntarily. "How many hegemony ships?" "How many hegemony ships?" "Approximately 90 vessels, Admiral. They appear to be from their 2nd and 4th assault fleets." "Signal the 6th and 9th fleets," Admiral Chen ordered. "Tell them to converge on the vegan system. Also contact Earth Command and request they activate the reserve fleets. If the hegemony wants to escalate this conflict, we'll show them what escalation looks like." The communication ended, and Admiral Chen turned back to HFY. "Captain, I'm afraid we'll need to cut short your stay aboard our ship. We have more people to protect." "Admiral," HFY said urgently, 90 hegemony ships is 3 times the force that attacked us. Are you certain your fleet can handle such numbers?" Admiral Chen smiled, and Zexhai realized it was the most terrifying expression he had ever seen on a sentient being's face. Captain, the hegemony is about to learn the difference between picking on defenseless research ships and fighting a species that has spent 30 years preparing for this exact war. She activated her personal communicator. All ships. This is Admiral Chen. Prepare for immediate departure to the vegan system. Rules of engagement are weapons-free against all hegemony forces. It appears they need a more comprehensive lesson in why attacking medical research is a bad idea. As alarms sounded throughout the ship and the human fleet began moving with the fluid precision that had destroyed the first hegemony force, Zexhai realized he was witnessing a turning point in galactic history. For centuries, aggressive empires had preyed on peaceful species with impunity. The strong had taken whatever they wanted from the weak, and the galaxy had accepted this as natural law. But humanity had changed that equation. They had built their entire civilization around the principle that innocent life deserved protection, regardless of species or political affiliation. They had created a military force that could back up that principle with overwhelming force. Captain, Dr. Santos called out. The cure production is complete. We have enough doses to begin immediate treatment on all affected worlds, and production facilities are being established throughout human space to ensure a steady supply. Zexhai looked at the vials containing the cure his people had died to protect, now safe in human hands and being mass-produced to save billions of lives. 3 days ago, he had sent out a desperate distress call, hoping for a few patrol ships to help him escape with his research. Instead, he had accidentally awakened a sleeping giant that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy forever. Through the viewport, he watched as hundreds of human ships prepared to jump to faster-than-light travel, ready to face a hegemony force 3 times larger than the one they had already destroyed. But there was no fear in their movements, no hesitation in their preparations. They were going to war with the calm confidence of people who had spent decades preparing for exactly this moment. The hegemony had built their empire on the principle that might makes right. They were about to discover that humanity had built something much stronger, the will to protect innocent life, backed by the military force to make that protection absolute. As the human fleet disappeared into hyperspace, heading toward what would become known as the Battle of Vegan, Zexhai finally understood what his desperate distress call had truly accomplished. He hadn't just saved the cure for a plague, he had introduced the galaxy to its new protectors.